Have you ever imagined what it's like to be treated like a traitor in your own country? Not for what you did, but for who you are, to have your name, your home, your freedom all stripped away because of your face, because of your ancestry, because your government decided it couldn't trust you even if you were born under its flag. Before we begin, take a moment to comment below. Which story of struggle, survival, and strength do you want us to tell next? The Vietnamese boat people, Cambodian genocide survivors, or Muslim Americans after 9/11? Let your voice guide our next truth. You're watching Equal Voices Hub, where stories that were silenced are finally spoken. And today, we uncover the chilling truth of how Japanese Americans during World War II had their loyalty questioned, their rights destroyed, and yet still held on to hope. Let's go back to December 7, 1941. A quiet Sunday morning in Hawaii is shattered as Japanese planes descend on Pearl Harbor. Smoke fills the sky, battleships burn. Over 2,400 Americans are killed. The next day, President Roosevelt addresses the nation. The US is now at war with Japan, but for over 120,000 Japanese Americans living in California, Oregon, and Washington, war brought a very different kind of terror. They weren't on the battlefield. They weren't armed. They were farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, children, but overnight they became enemies in the eyes of their neighbors and their own government. The media called them spies. Politicians said they couldn't be trusted. Whispers turned into shouts. Suspicion became accusation. And in February 1942, just 10 weeks after Pearl Harbor, President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066. It authorized the forced removal of any person deemed a threat to national security. But the order wasn't applied. Equally, it didn't target Americans of German or Italian descent. Not on this scale. It was Japanese Americans who were singled out, not because of any proven threat, but because of their race. Over 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry were forced from their homes. 2/3 of them were American citizens. They were told to pack up everything they could carry. Not their house, not their farm, not their piano or photographs, just a suitcase. A suitcase to carry a lifetime. They lost homes they had built, businesses they had spent decades growing. Entire communities vanished overnight. No trials, no hearings, no charges. Entire families, infants, grandparents, US veterans were relocated to makeshift assembly centers, horse stalls, racetracks, livestock pens. From there, they were transported to one of 10 war relocation centers spread across desolate areas of the US, places with names like Manzanar, Heart Mountain, Topaz, and Tule Lake. These weren't just camps, they were prisons, surrounded by barbed wire, guarded by soldiers with rifles. Watchtowers loomed over families, and the message was clear: you are not one of us. But how did America get here? This wasn't just about wartime fear. This was the result of decades of anti-Asian racism in the 19th century. Chinese immigrants were targeted with mob violence and discriminatory laws. The 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act banned them from entering the country altogether. As Japanese immigration rose in the early 20th century, similar hatred followed. In California, Japanese immigrants were forbidden from owning land. Their children faced segregation in schools. Signs were posted that read, "No Japs allowed." So when Pearl Harbor happened, the groundwork for suspicion had already been laid. General John L. DeWitt, who oversaw the internment policy, once said, "A Jap is a Jap. It makes no difference whether he is an American citizen or not." That wasn't about national security. That was about racism. Now imagine you're a teenager, born in Los Angeles. You pledge allegiance every morning. You listen to swing music. You love baseball, but then the government tells you you're not American enough. You're put on a bus. Your classmates look away and you arrive at a dusty, wind-blown camp in the desert. You sleep in a barrack with cracks in the walls. No insulation, one light bulb, toilet stalls without doors, snow in the winter, dust storms in the summer, guards outside, guns pointed inward. You're not guilty of a crime, but you live like a prisoner. And yet, despite everything, Japanese Americans held on to family, to identity, to hope. They organized schools in the camps, determined their children would keep learning. They created newspapers to share information and culture. They made music with homemade instruments. They grew gardens in dead soil, and they found ways to live fully, proudly, even inside a fence. There were artists like Chiyoda Obata who painted beauty even within the barbed wire. There were mothers sewing kimonos from flour sacks, fathers coaching baseball teams on dusty fields. They refused to be broken. But perhaps the most profound act of resilience came from those who volunteered to fight, even as their families were behind fences. Thousands of young Japanese American men enlisted in the US Army. The most famous was the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, Go for Broke. Their motto read, they became the most decorated unit in US military history for its size and length of service. They rescued the Lost Battalion in France. They fought in Italy and Germany. They earned over 18,000 awards, and they did all of this while being treated as second-class citizens at home. They didn't fight because they were welcomed. They fought because they believed in the promise of America, even when it betrayed them. But not everyone went along quietly. There were resistors, people like Fred Korematsu, who refused to report for relocation. He was arrested, convicted, and he took his case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. In 1944, the court ruled against him. They upheld internment, but Korematsu never gave up. 40 years later, his conviction was overturned, and in 1998, he received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. There was Gordon Hirabayashi, who defied curfew orders. Minoru Yasui, who walked into a police station demanding to be arrested. They didn't resist out of anger. They resisted because silence is surrender, and they believed their country could be better. Decades passed before America began to make amends. In 1988, President Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act, issuing a formal apology and reparations of $20,000. To each surviving internee, Reagan said, "Here we admit a wrong. Here we affirm our commitment as a nation to equal justice under the law." It was a powerful moment, but no amount of money could return the years lost. The farms, the businesses, the childhoods, the trauma echoed through generations. Even today, many Japanese Americans speak of silence, parents who never spoke of the camps, grandparents who carried their pain privately, because the shame wasn't theirs, but they carried it anyway. So why does this story still matter? Because history doesn't live in the past. After 9/11, Muslim and Arab Americans faced detention, surveillance, and suspicions just like Japanese Americans before them. During COVID-19, Asian Americans were attacked in subways, blamed on the streets, targeted in stores. The words "go back to your country" still echo in 2025 once again. Loyalty is questioned based on appearance. Once again, barbed wire may not be visible, but walls of suspicion still rise. What does it mean to be American? Is it your birthplace, your passport, or is it your courage to believe in liberty when it's denied to you? To build, create, and love a country that hasn't always loved you back. Japanese Americans showed the world what dignity under pressure looks like. They turned betrayal into strength, silence into stories, loss into legacy. At Equal Voices Hub, we bring these stories forward because if we don't tell them, they disappear. They become footnotes, forgotten. But these are not footnotes, they are testaments to the pain of injustice and the power of hope. Share this story. Comment below whose voice should rise next. Let's remember the families at Manzanar, courage of Korematsu, the valor of the 442 ND. And the lesson they left for all of us: never again. To anyone, ever.